A dish with one spoon. The indigenous people welcomed the settlers from across the seas when they arrived in their territories. Such beauty revealed before their eyes was impossible for them to describe. In all the words and languages that the settlers spoke, there were no words that could evoke with any clarity a single thought that Mother Nature's beauty brought. It was from the indigenous tongues that the settlers learned the language of the earth in all her idioms. Toronto, from Takaranto, trees standing in the water, a place where small fish could gather. On nearby hills where alders grow, that was called Etobicoke. In the autumn, before the winter snows, the passenger pigeons rested in Mimico. And to the west, where the great waters flow, the lake and lands were called Ontario. Eagles soar high with prayers for Manitou. The Mississauga people launched their birch bark canoes. Three sisters, corn, bean, and squash, the planting season has begun. Tobacco is offered to grandfather's son. Sage, sweetgrass, and cedar to grandmother moon. There is peace, joy, and harmony in the treaty lands called a dish with one spoon.
I would like to welcome our dear host, Mr. Rick Phillips, who, among many other things, is a broadcaster, podcaster, writer, teacher, travel tour host with decades-long affiliation to the CBC. And not to mention a very long-time friend of the Mendelssohn Choir, who we are thrilled to have here with us tonight, Rick. With this, I hand it over to you. And have fun, everyone.
Thanks, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with everyone, and welcome everyone to Behind the Screen with the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. I would argue that 15 months ago, when the COVID-19 pandemic began, most of us had never heard of the online Zoom platform or other video and web conferencing platforms, and now it's a household word. Over the last 15 months, I'm sure many of you have seen or been involved in choral events presented online. Choirs, choristers, and conductors everywhere, amateur and professional, have acquired new skills and ways of presenting choral events online. But how do they do it? What's involved? That's the premise for our Toronto Mendelssohn Choir presentation tonight, Behind the Screen. With me, virtually, of course, is a panel of experts who have been involved in this kind of work over the past year for the TMC 2020-2021 season. They are, in order, Anne Longmore, the Director of Marketing for the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. Simon Rivard is the Associate Conductor of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. Katie Clark is a chorister with the TMC and one of the members of the Professional Corps. And Dave King of Inline Digital is the TMC video editor and webcast producer. Welcome to all of you. Tonight, we're going to hear from all of them and how they fit into this last TMC season. And we'll be able to see behind the screen and how the 2020-21 TMC presentations were produced. Where and how did they begin? Who was involved? And what was the process? Then at the end of tonight's event, in about 50 minutes or so, we'll open things up to you, our audience, for a question and answer period to the people on the panel. If a question arises during our discussion, you can pose it to the Q&A function on the Zoom platform as we go through the evening. Or you can use the like function for a question that you've developed, but you notice is already there. That way it gets prioritized and we'll know it's important to us. And finally, when you were at the Q&A session, you can also use the hand raise function and open up and ask your question audibly over Zoom. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm looking forward to tonight, and we hope that you are too. I've got a tie on, not because of the formality of the event, but just because I have not worn a tie in 15 months. It's kind of like a new experience for me. But like the proverbial TV anchorman sitting behind the news desk, I will not show or tell you what I am wearing below the waist. Well, to begin, let's turn to Anne Longmore, the TMC Director of Marketing. And how quickly after concerts were canceled because of the pandemic did the Mendelssohn Choir start thinking about online presentations? What were the first couple of steps?
Thanks, Rick. Well, like many people, I think when it started, we were hopeful that it would only be a few weeks. So we canceled our early April concert and we're hopeful that we would be able to do our May 30th concert. And then when it became apparent that that also would need to be canceled, we started to think we want to continue to engage with our TMC community, our audience. We want to continue to share choral music at a time when people were particularly missing it. And so we looked at the program plan for May 30th, which had been planned by our interim conductor at that point, David Follis, and it was Great Poets and Music. And we thought, and that was meant to be music that had been poetry set to music by some great composers. And we realized that that story could still be told and it was worth telling. And we, of course, did not have, this was early May, we decided this, did not have time to develop a number of virtual choir pieces. So we thought there are lots of choirs who have recorded some of this music. We reached out to choirs in the UK, in the US and Finland, asked them if we could use their recordings. And then David added the idea of why don't we have some people read some of the poetry? And that idea then became, why don't we have Stratford actors read the poetry, which became Lucy Peacock and Tom McCamus. And then when they got involved, they thought, why don't we add poetry about music and the power of music? And so over 3 very intense weeks, the program was created. And that really set the tone for us, that level of collaboration, that the idea started as a kernel and lots of different people added different creative elements and we made it work. We at one point toyed with the idea of doing it live. Thank goodness we realized that was not right with everyone's various internets. So we produced it and streamed it. And as I say, that was the start and how we kept going forward and added even more and more collaborators, which you'll be talking to Simon about. And in the Great Poets program, it also included our very first virtual choir piece, which was Cantique de Jean Racine, and it was done with the TSO and TSYO performers as well. And so at this point, I will pass Rick the baton over to Simon, or since he's a hockey fan, I should probably say I'll pass the puck.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Now we go to Simon Rivard, the associate conductor of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. Simon, we've all had to alter and adapt our lifestyles over the last 15 months or so of this pandemic, learning new skills and ways of doing things. But can you take us back to March of 2020? How were you and the Mendelssohn Choir affected by COVID, and how did the plans get started?
I was personally affected a lot by professionally by this pandemic because I'm part of the TSO organization, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and at the time I was supposed to step in for a Sacred Music in a Sacred Space concert. I was not part of the organization of the Mendelssohn Choir, but I was supposed to conduct a concert, and this is one of the first things that got canceled when COVID happened. And another thing that got canceled was the Toronto Symphony Youth Orchestra whole remainder of the season. And in that season, we were supposed to do a side-by-side with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Every year, the Youth Symphony does a side-by-side with the professional orchestra. So I thought, okay, TMC concert is canceled, TSYO concert are canceled, and the side-by-side are canceled. Can I do one project that will put everything together? So I started thinking, and there was interest also in the Mendelssohn Choir to do something online, to not just be, caught in dismay and not know what to do. So I had this idea of Cantique de Jean Racine, which would be a triple side-by-side, which would include Mendelssohn Choir, TSYO, and TSO musicians, because at the time, that was in April that we recorded all of this, there were already many online virtual projects going around. Some choirs were doing pieces, and services online. Many orchestras were doing either small versions of symphonies or whole orchestras, like Orchestre de Radio France were doing videos with 60 or 80 different tracks. So this 5-minute piece by Fauré, which included singers and musicians, was something that hadn't been done before, and I think was a very exciting way to begin this online project. But it took so many hours of editing, and thank God we had Dennis Kwok with us, who did the heavy lifting on that project. That you could see, it was the first excerpt shown in the video that you saw at the beginning of this talk. So heads in boxes, so each singer recorded individually to a click track, and everything was edited together. It took, dozens and dozens of hours to put together, but it was very fulfilling by the end.
Can we see a little bit?
Dave, do we have an excerpt, or Kathleen?
I think Kathleen's got it, doesn't she?
Yes, yes, I do.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So Simon, how did you go from this, we've seen a clip of it, but how did you go from this, it's about a 5-minute choir video of Cantique de Jean Racine, to the 4 50-minute concerts you presented in the last season of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir?
Well, that was quite a journey. The first thing is that those heads in boxes videos became old very quickly. Everybody was doing it back in April and May and June. And by September, we were asking, well, can we really sustain the attention of the audience for 50 minutes or even 30 minutes with, only heads in boxes videos? Even if we pan them, even if they're wonderfully filmed, can it sustain the attention of people? And also, is it good enough? Is it artistically fulfilling enough to just do a concert with heads in boxes? The second thing that happened was the whole Black Lives Matter movement that became to the forefront for the whole year. And we had very heated discussions about diversity within the Mendelssohn Choir and the necessity to address that and to start having a well thought strategy to be a choir of our times. So it was important for me at least, and for the whole administration and the whole choir, to take a step back and not start programming freely what we thought was good, but start discussions with artists and make collaborations. And the idea of having curators for the first 2 concerts of the season became, I think, a very pregnant idea. So for the first concert, the Thanksgiving concert, we approached Subha Shankaran, who is an Canadian Indian performer, jazz singer, conductor. She's a woman of 1,000 talents, and we decided to co-create a concert with her. So she made arrangements. We sang some of her pieces, some of her partner's pieces. She conducted a piece, and we even had a collaboration with Supriya Nayak, who is an Odissi dancer. Also, you could see that in the trailer. We'll see a video excerpt shortly. But that allowed us to move away from only heads in boxes. It was a mixture of different kinds of recordings. We recorded the professional core of the TMC as a unit distance at Trinity St. Paul's. So that allowed us to have some shots of the choir singing together, which was very important to us because at that time it was still allowed to do that. So as much as possible, the whole year we tried to have that sense of community and to be able to have some kind of singing together. So I think we can watch an excerpt from that concert, which was called Kanama.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Simon, then you went to Remembrance Day.
Yeah, we went to Remembrance Day, and this time the curator was Andrew Balfour, who's a wonderful composer and performer of Cree descent. He was based in Winnipeg and now in Toronto. And we had 1,000 plans for that concert. We had Plan A, which involved recording in person, and then in November, and Plan B, which involved a hybrid version, Plan C, everybody at home. And in November, the restrictions became very, very strict. So we had to go straight to Plan C, and even more strict than that. So this was a concert that was all recorded from home, a little bit like Cantique de Jean Racine. So it was a big challenge. So that's why when we came to Festival of Carols, we tried to have a little bit of in-person singing. By that time, choirs in Toronto started to rehearse with screens between the singers. That was a new rule that was instated around that time. So we were able to bring singers inside. So the professional choir of the TMC, which was about 20, I think it was 16 for that recording, recorded the music inside with shower curtains between singers, distance. So it was very difficult to hear each other, but at least we were all in the same room, which was still easier than recording from home. And we had to post-sync that with shots from us singing outside, because the shower curtains looked positively ugly. Well, the singers themselves looked fine, but the picture of having all the shower was really post-apocalyptic. So we tried to find a way to make it more pleasing. So we went outside. It was freezing outside York Minster Park. So we were kind of trying to heat up between shots and then trying to be super expressive. So the piece that we had recorded inside was blasted through speakers outside, and we were lip syncing to the music because at that time we weren't allowed to gather outside and even speak without mask. So we had to mouth the words, because if not, we would have been we would have been outlaws, basically. So we had to lip sync. But I think that this concert was a miracle. The lip sync worked very, very well. And let's watch a little excerpt to convince you that it worked very, very well.
This is Festival of Carols.
Festival of Carols.
2020.
Yeah. I apologize for the Christmas carol in June. In Quebec, we say that if we sing a Christmas song in June, it will rain tomorrow. So sorry about that. Um, uh, but as you can see, for some of the pieces, the challenges were even bigger because we thought, why not put everything together? Have people outside post-synced and have people at home to recreate this sense of community. And even we had an introduction. The whole accompaniment to that carol was played by Matthew Larkin in his church. I think he recorded it in Ottawa, but maybe in Toronto as well. I don't remember exactly where, but I sent a click track to him. He recorded a lengthy and beautiful, intricate introduction, and then the accompaniment. And I said, you can use some freedom, because one of the challenges when we do click tracks is that it has to sound natural. It cannot be like a metronome all the time. The end of phrases have to be natural and the beginning of phrases have to be natural. So I said, Matthew, go for it, just be free. But then we had to lip sync with him, free with his freedom. So that created some challenges as well. But as you can see, it's all of the components together. That was a very difficult show to put together.
Okay, and Simon, briefly, let's turn to the annual Eastertide concert of the TMC, Sacred Music for a Sacred Space. This would be April 2021, just a couple of months ago. And this had a collaboration with a dancer and choreographer. Can you briefly set that up for us?
Yes, so the idea about Sacred Music for a Sacred Space is that usually sacred spaces are a social thing. We gather together at church, we gather together at temple, or it's a communal thing. But during this pandemic, it was mainly an individual thing. The sacred space had to be your own individual sacred space, and that's what triggered the idea of having a dancer representing the individual sacred space, the reaction of the individual to sacred music. It was the most difficult project to put together, because now we had a whole ensemble together playing an accompaniment, and then we had the pro corps singing indoors, and then we had everybody singing from their homes, but putting all of this together, and that was the lengthiest amount of music that we had all year. The choreography of Laurence Lemieux on the Bach cantata was one of the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed as an artist. I was there during the dress rehearsal. That she did that on a Sunday morning. We just went to her studio to masked and everything to see her dance to the tracks, and I couldn't refrain from crying. And I was like, this is it. It will be an incredible project, and I'm sure everybody felt really emotional watching her dance. It was a wonderful aesthetic and artistic experience, and I hope we will be able to redo it, but in person. So let's just watch.
We've got a clip of it here.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
Lovely. Simon, just briefly before we leave you then, in your work to date, you've dealt mostly in a musical or an oral sound world, and now there's a pretty distinct visual element too. What new skills did you have to acquire? How does that change life for you in your job?
Well, for starters, there are two schools of thought. Some people thought that classical music was all about the music and what we could hear, but I've always been a very strong supporter of the view that it's an all-encompassing art and that the visuals have always been very important. And that is one really strong parameter when people attend concerts. There's the visuals, how the singers or the instrumentalists really dig into their instrument, how their faces move when they play or when they're not playing, how they get on stage, how they get off stage, if there's lighting or all of that. And I think that now it forced everyone to think of the, let's say, the theatricals or the visuals of music. That being said, there were many new skills to acquire, mainly how to film ourselves and how to light ourselves properly, how to frame ourselves properly, to convey the meaning of the music. Now we see that just singing to a camera and not really knowing what to do with our face, that caused a lot of frustration early on for the singers, because they had to do many takes, because they had to look critically at themselves and listen critically at themselves. And it was for many a big challenge. So the new skills were mainly technology based, but also self-awareness based. But I think everyone pulled through, and the more the year went on, and especially in the last projects, people were more relaxed and more willing to just take risks and send in their recordings, even if they were not 100% satisfied with them. And I think everybody learned. And when we come back to regular concerts, it will be almost a given that the visuals also have an impact.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next person on our panel, and that's Katie Clark, who's part of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir, the professional corps. Katie, when and how were you and the other TMC choristers involved in these presentations, as Simon describes? Describe your involvement in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would start obviously with a rehearsal process, which looked very different from what we would be used to. Instead of getting together once a week with 120 people in a room and we all get to sing together, it was a much more isolated process. So many of our rehearsals, in fact, almost all of our rehearsals, were taking place online. So often Simon would give a presentation about whatever piece we were going to be working on and provide some context. And then we would have sectionals run by a member of each section. Sometimes for the sopranos, that was me. Sometimes it was one of my other really awesome colleagues. But we would run a little sectional and everybody would have their microphone muted and be singing into nothingness, basically. But we would go through and try to address any technical issues in the pieces, any particularly difficult points. So that was what a lot of the rehearsal process looked like. Early in the season, we were able to, when the weather was nice, I think have one outdoor rehearsal, which was wonderful to hear other human beings singing. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. And we all had singers' masks, so it was very safe. But then of course it snows. So that was not possible for the rest of the season. But
you get as much enjoyment and fulfillment in this new process as you did in the old style of singing in person?
Yeah, I was trying to find a diplomatic answer to this question. No.
No need.
No. A most emphatic no. I deeply miss singing with my colleagues. This repertoire isn't supposed to be sung isolated. It's not supposed to be sung with just one person at a time singing, maybe listening to a MIDI track or maybe not. It's supposed to be many voices coming together and creating that beautiful sonic impact that we all know from choral concerts. And so I miss that terribly. And yeah, recording in this way, recording by yourself can be a very frustrating process. But I do have to say the products that TMC came up with were really impressive. And I think that's mostly to do with some pretty magical sorcery on the point of view of the tech people like Dave. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Katie. I'd like to return to Anne Longmore, the Director of Marketing of the TMC, just briefly. Anne, in putting together these programs, we've now seen the dance element. How did that come in? Did you find that there was something missing or that you needed to add something to the music? Can you talk a little bit about the graphic elements?
Sure. I think what we found as we went through the programs was that they had very complete storyline through the music and through the artistic collaborations. But we realized what we were missing was that unified space, because normally we're sitting in a venue where that venue provides some ambiance and we're all there together. And so that creates some unity through the program. And we were missing that. And so we realized we needed to develop that through graphics. And that graphic element could not only provide the unity, but could also complement the storyline that was there. And so really had to start storyboarding our concerts and figure out where do we need to add elements. So actually, I'll get Kathleen to bring up one of our slides. And so the first concert where we really went into this was Natinaku, the Remembrance Day concert. And so after discussions with Andrew Balfour, did some research through the Veterans Affairs archives and wanted to start the program reminding people of Indigenous veterans, which is what this program was focusing on. And so we started with a slide of Francis Pegmagabo, and some other Indigenous veterans from the First and Second World Wars. The other element we found was, as Katie has talked about, the not as fulfilling aspect of having to sing alone at home. And so we looked for other ways for our choristers to be involved as well. And so for Remembrance Day, asked choristers if they wanted to share some of their remembrances, what they think about on Remembrance Day, what family members they're remembering. And so we researched again through the archives, some international, but also through Veterans Affairs, to come up with monuments that were appropriate to the memory. And so this memory from one of our choristers, David Young, about his family who were with the South Saskatchewan Regiment, we added that monument, and we did that for all of the memories. And that idea of involving choristers in many different ways really took flight with Festival of Carols, where we had the theme of basically TMC inviting our audience into our homes to celebrate Christmas, to enjoy Christmas music. And so choristers did all the introductions, choristers shared stories, and for example, Renee Ardiente, one of our altos, shared the importance of the Philippine Christmas carol that her family performed for us actually, and we heard about the story of that from her. So there were many different things like that. And choristers gave us their favorite images of their favorite Christmas ornaments to add to some of the slides and things like that. So it was really a full choir endeavor for Festival of Carols. But I think maybe before I get to sacred music, I know that Katie, I think, was going to talk about some of the experience for her as a professional chorister and show us Simon conducting. And I really don't want people to miss that. So if we can go back to Katie to hear about Simon conducting.
Okay, Katie, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, well, one of the issues that we ran into early on with everyone recording in their own homes was the question of ensemble, of trying to get those cutoffs together, trying to get the tuning all together, and there were a lot of issues. So for the Remembrance Day concert, Simon created these videos of him conducting. So Kathleen is going to share a little bit, just to give you a sense of what we were looking at as we were making our own individual videos from home.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
That's why it was very difficult to be together.
Yeah, no kidding. We had
Overlapping.
ensemble problems.
talk about the process just a little bit more to give me some time to reload this?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what
Okay.
you're about to see in this video, my favorite part of the video, not that your conducting isn't great, Simon, but my favorite part is you hear the clave giving us the beat to come in, and then there's a clap that flashes up on the screen with the clap sound. And we would all need to clap, of course, so that would be a sync point for putting all of our audio tracks together, so that we wouldn't end up with, ragged ends and whatnot. And then, of course, we have the video of Simon conducting.
Okay, do we have that, Kathleen? Maybe not. Maybe we should just move on, okay? We'll come back to it. We can always come back to it. But maybe we should now go to the next person on the panel, and that's Dave King. Dave's in charge of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir video recording, program compilation, and streaming. Dave, when do you enter the process that Simon has described?
Thanks, Rick. I enter the program after the initial sort of brain trust comes up with the concept. And my first job is to listen intently to what the vision is and see if I can contribute here and there with solutions. My second sort of job is to record elements. As Simon spoke about, these are all separated components that go into the concert, and each component needs to be recorded. So that's my second role. The third role is the collation of all the elements. So the heads and boxes that Simon and Dennis produced, the orchestra recordings, for example, the Kanama recordings, the Procore recordings, and of course integrating as well the remastered audio for the whole program. And then lastly is the webcasting itself, which has its own inherent challenges, especially in these times when everybody and their cousin is watching Netflix at exactly the same time that we want to send out a webcast. Yeah. So that's basically what I do. So there's a lot that goes into that as well.
What are your concerns, Dave, and how do you resolve things like synchronization of the picture to the audio and the varying quality that you would get from each of the choristers and so on? How do you resolve those kinds of things?
Well, I didn't, the heads and boxes I basically received from Dennis. So Dennis did a superb job coordinating that, and my hat goes off to Dennis, because it is a nightmare and an enormous job to coordinate the singers with different devices, with frankly different time codes built into these devices. So you get, he would have received a collection of different videos and audio, and he would have had to re-coordinate those and fake it here and there as well to make it, fake it to make it sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the coordination of the AV is tricky. Quality is tricky. You know what I might do actually is I wanted to share something from the Festival of Carols, if you can bear with me for 1 sec.
Yeah, and it would be great, Dave, if you could show us what you look at when you're at the screen, when you're behind the screen.
Yeah, okay. Just to finish my thinking though around, you asked me what my difficulties are in the process. So coordinating of the audio visual elements is obviously key. Keeping track of them, something as simple as file naming is so important. And I can think of a couple of examples, but Simon was getting carried away with his creativity and forgot to name files properly. So I had to dig through those files to find the ones that actually coordinated with what he was giving me as a mastered track. Resolution, of course, is key as well, because we're trying to keep a consistent look and feel. The collection of all those assets is also very tricky, and actually Anne was superb at handling that for me. So instead of me poking at people to get assets, Anne was doing that, where so that I could work on those things. Mm-hmm. and then I guess the most stressful aspect of it for me was managing the internet issues. You know, before the concert, I would have Rogers physically in the building, you know, 3 days before, even if there wasn't a problem. I hope nobody from Rogers is on there, but I wanted that system bulletproof, because I don't know if any of the audience were watching Kenema, you might have experienced some lag time, and it was frustrating for us, having created that concert, to have any issue at all. So we figured out what those problems were, fixed them, but then, you know, it's a continual, there's so many variables involved in that process.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump over to a project. Let me think here. Festival of Carols. Yeah, here we go. Just bear with me, please. Okay, maybe I'm not going to jump to that project. Just
Is it because I misnamed the file, Dave, that you're having
Yeah.
problems finding it?
yeah, exactly. Here we go. Instead, I'll go to another project, which will explain coordination. And here we go. I'm going to share my screen. So here's an example of what I'm looking at. This is sacred music, and hopefully you can see my huge mouse that I increased the size of, so you could follow me. If you start right at the bottom of our screen here, this was the forest walk sequence, and basically I recorded this forest walk. Again, this is the vision of the core creative team. And then it was my job to go out and collect, to the best I could, what they were looking for. So the forest walk was recorded by me using a GoPro, you know, 8 or something, with 2 levels of stabilization. So it was actually the perfect tool to record that. It wasn't an ideal time of year because it was early spring and there wasn't a leaf on any tree. But, you know, morning sun was nice, and it turned out to be okay.
What
The next,
if we continue on to, so on the bottom is the forest walk, and then go through each of these lines that are above the forest walk.
sure, okay.
What are they?
So actually, I'll start even below the forest walk. So
Okay.
the mastered audio from Simon is right here at the very bottom. Then the forest walk, then Gergely playing the piano.
He's the TMC pianist.
That's right. And then the full choir, which is the next line, and you can see them up above. And then above that are the basses.
So the parts that are highlighted in blue is what we're looking up, just 1 o'clock-ish.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just play this little sequence.
Great.
So I'll start with the forest walk. The sopranos, basses, tenors, altos, sopranos, and back to the full choir, and you can see below where we are, and then we're going to go to Gergely and then back to the forest walk.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about challenges. Well, the take that Simon used for audio was not the take that I could use for video, because it turned out that it wasn't good. It was just poorly shot. I shot that video of Gergely with 3 robotic cameras, And the take that Simon used in his master track was not the same as the one I had to use for the video. So,
Well, Dave, to be precise, the take that we used for the video was not even Gergely playing that piano. The take that we chose was Gergely playing his keyboard at home. So that's the magic of the click
Oh,
track.
really?
okay.
Because the ambient sound in the church where we recorded the real piano, it was too noisy, and it was
And
not.
it had a
exactly-
pedal problem, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I wondered how you got rid of that pedal problem.
Change pianos.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for that, Simo. That's interesting.
And
Okay.
Oh, Rick, just one
Go
last
ahead.
thing for the viewers. It might be interesting, but the small layer of sound that you see on that screen, let it not fool you, because this is the video software. But in the audio software where I mixed the audio for that concert, there, as you see many tracks there on that screen. I had like 60 tracks of all individual tracks of the singers that I needed to mix together and make
Yeah.
fix to make them sing together. And for some of the pieces, it was almost 500 edits for one piece. So it looks like a very easy track at the bottom of the screen, but the actual screen, the audio screen, was very complex as well. Just as a point of information.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's amazing. Yeah.
Rick,
Okay, well,
I might share one
Go
more
ahead,
thought
Dave.
here, just
Sure.
because this is further to the discussion around the click track, and so that you can actually hear what these performers are listening to when they are lip syncing, or in some cases singing. Okay.
Yep.
That was punched out over a speaker outside at York Minster at -10 degrees. And there's your finished track. So that demonstrates a bit of the challenge there.
Yeah. Maybe Dave, I'm not sure that everybody in our audience may know what a click track is. Can you just briefly just define that?
I think Simon would be better to describe that.
I'm just not sure everybody knows what we're talking about.
Okay, so to make a click track, I use a software where I transcribe the music. It's a music notation software, and then I have to adjust a metronome on each of the beats. So it's like beep, boom, 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 bim, boom for each of the beats, and making it a musical phrase. So there were countless accelerandos and decelerandos and all of that to be able to make it musical. So the singers would get a MIDI version of their voice with a very loud click over it to make sure that all the beats are in sync.
Mm-hmm. The purpose of the click track is to synchronize the sound with the video, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. Well, we're running a little bit short of time, so let's move on to to the entire panel, and Simon, Dave, and Katie. Well, let's talk a little bit about the future. When the pandemic is over and fingers are crossed and it's looking good, will we return to the traditional tried and true ways of presenting TMC concerts? What will change if we do? Will the online experience continue? Will we be doing both? What do you think? And I open this up to all of you.
Personally, I think that I cannot wait to get back in person, and I'm not super interested in having hybrid versions with online content. I think the online is very good to archive and broadcast concerts. So if it's good for accessibility, it's good for outreach. So when we record a concert, to record it creatively and being able to use what we've recorded to post on Facebook later on, or to post before as a teaser, or to reach a larger audience. But inside of the concert, I think that is sacred music in a sacred space. For me, it's very important that it remains a human endeavor, communal, like social and community endeavor. And the less technology, the better. But all the interdisciplinary work that we have done, and to integrate concerts in one concept, I think this will probably carry on to the future.
Yeah. And Longmore, Director of Marketing, what do you think? Are we going to doing both? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We want to be singing together in person and interacting with our audience, but the whole possibilities with accessibility and augmenting programs through online is really important. We had an audience for online before that valued that. And we know from research that's being done throughout the pandemic that there are parts of our audience who, a lot of people who see that online will continue to play a role in their arts consumption, that they want to do maybe both, or they may want to wait a little longer before they go in person. So I think it's still going to have a role, but like Simon, I don't think it's the heads and boxes recording at home. It's recording our choir doing something live. But then I think the game has been stepped up, and we are going to have to think about those other elements around it as well. No longer can we have a camera and just shoot it and send it out. I think we have to be more creative there. And also we can use intermission time, if there is intermission, or in an online program, to maybe have an interview with a conductor, an interview with a composer. We can add some other components, because we've also now learned we don't all have to be in the same room to do things. The choristers want to and need to be in the same room, but some of our collaborators may not need to be. And some of, like a composer, we could now reach across the world to do an interview, and that's become far more the norm. So I think it's going to be a combination of things, but focused on a live performance.
Yeah. Okay, Katie, Dave, anything to add?
Yeah, I will just say that one of the things I have loved about this season is to see the repertoire that TMC does well and is able to excel at, presented in dialogue with other artistic idioms and artistic idioms from other cultures. I think that has been so beautiful, and TMC has done that in a really sensitive and interesting way, and I hope that that continues, because it's just such an interesting dialogue to carry out.
Great. So the combination of both, I guess, is what we're looking at. The best of both worlds, let's hope. Well, maybe we should turn now to a short question and answer period from our audience. And first, maybe we could get to the questions that have come in over the last 50 minutes or so on the Q&A function on Zoom. And Kathleen Stevenson has been collating those. Kathleen, have you got some questions for the panel?
I do. I think the first couple have just been answered. The first one we had was, how will this online experience influence performances once we get back to in-person concerts?
The big
I think
question.
we covered that.
Yeah.
Then we have a question here from Tom, who says, as we start to emerge from COVID, do you have any thoughts about hybrid presentations? Again, I believe we may have just covered that.
I think as well as we can.
As much and as well as we can. So I'm going to skip over to this next question from Cynthia Hawkins. Can you give us an overall average cost of one of the concerts and divide it between performer costs and technical costs? For example, X with X percentage performer costs and X percentage technical costs.
Maybe we should turn to Anna Koitar for that one. Anna, are you still able to come up with that?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Cynthia, by the way. We looked at the numbers on average. So some went quite a bit over, some slightly under. We're looking at about $20,000 per concert to produce this. So it's probably way more than any of you anticipated. And in terms of the division between artistic and technical cost, again, this is an average. About 65% is artistic and 35% is technical. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that in detail if you want, separately, offline.
Okay, yeah. Great. So Cynthia's just looking for help on Pax Christi, I think.
It's industrial espionage.
That's it, yeah. Legal espionage. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Cynthia, for that question there. Anybody else have, Kathleen, any other questions?
There are a few more here that have come in. The next one we have is for, I think this is going to be for Anne. The question is, what was the average audience size?
Take it away, Anne.
We had, and I actually meant to look up a specific figure before tonight and I forgot, but we had in the thousands, so be sort of in the hundreds on the night of, but then of course, because we kept the concerts up, then it would grow. And so a lot of people would watch over the next little while. And actually a big thing, Kathleen, actually, maybe I can get you to share the final slide. I think one of the things that we're so proud of at the TMC is the international scope of our audience. And I know that Amy, who writes a lot of our grants, loves to be able to point out that we are seen on 6 out of the 7 continents. And so, and we get feedback from a lot of people about the concerts. And so we reach people in our own area and across Canada, across the US, and as you see, into a number of different countries. And so that we were lucky in that we've done some webcasting before of live concerts. And so we've managed to build up an audience that way. And so obviously we'd love to look at continuing that and reaching those people.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, isn't it? To be able to, I mean, that's really the wonderful thing about these platforms is the international thing has just sprung up, well, in the last year. The international aspect is wonderful. Anything else, Kathleen?
Yeah, I have actually several here, Rick. So I'm gonna take over here. This is a question probably for Katie and Simon. What type of recording device / microphone did choir members use in their homes?
Yeah, so for the first video, the foray, I was just using my laptop, like my built-in laptop mic and whatever webcam was there, and it became obvious fairly quickly that at-home recording wasn't going anywhere. So I invested in what is called a Blue Snowball microphone, which is just a little USB mic, and it did okay. But I know that many of the choristers were just using either a phone or an iPad or a laptop built-in mic, just kind of whatever they had on hand.
Yeah, in the beginning, as Katie said, many people were using their laptops, and that created some issues because the microphones on the laptops are very good if you're talking. But when you're singing at different volumes, different intensity, they were maxed out pretty quickly. And when you have 60 recordings, or let's say 20 sopranos maxing out their mics, and it peaks, and it's impossible after that to make a nice sound out of it. So it was really good to have some people with better microphones so that when they sang loudly, it didn't, glitch, it didn't do that sound. Also, we had to change our way of singing, and I insisted that people sang at a mezzo type of voice, so mezzo piano, mezzo forte, not too loud, not too soft, because that's when the recording was at its best. And also not only the devices, but the software they were using. Some people were using Zoom, and in Zoom, if you hold a note for a very long time, Zoom kind of cancels it. So some people were holding long notes and then suddenly disappearing, but we could see that they were singing, but the technology made it so it became a background noise for the computer and we couldn't hear anything. So they had to redo the recording. So there were several issues, and as the year went on, those issues were resolved one by one. And I think everybody made leaps and bounds, and it was very good by the end.
Oh, great.
Great.
Okay, Kathleen.
Yeah. So the next one is for Simon, but then also for Dave. So the first part says, Christine Fong says, thanks for a great presentation. I saw that you were using Final Cut Pro for the video. What did you use for the audio? That is your part, Simon. Second part, how many cameras did you use for the filming process?
For the audio, I used Logic Pro, and I had no idea that this software existed before the pandemic. So in March, I ordered the Apple 300-page thing on Logic Pro, and the one on Final Cut Pro. I went through it, did all the little exercises, and I was ready to go to record those mammoth projects. So, Logic Pro.
And Dave?
Dave, anything to add?
In terms of cameras, it depends what we were shooting, but generally 4 cameras, 3 of them fully robotic and 1 static safety wide.
Great, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue with you, Dave. For learning, David Young has a question for you. For learning about and experimenting with audio only editing, or both audio and video, well, this might be for Simon as well. What are your thoughts on Mac versus PC versus Linux?
I'm a big Mac fan because of integration on all levels, devices, the technology, the software. It's that's where I've been focused. However, that's not where everybody's focused, and particularly in live streaming, that is born out of the Windows world. So, in answer to your question, I believe that the editing, you'll have guys argue with me on this, but basically, I think that the Mac is heavily invested in the integration and superb software for editing. But it doesn't mean you're out of the woods, because there are other, you always have to bring in other elements, and they're not necessarily born in the Mac space.
And I think that this question is harder to, it's even a more loaded question than haves versus leaves kind of thing. So I'm not going to get into
To keep it topical.
Exactly. I'm not going to get into that.
Okay, let's go on, Kathleen.
Okay, great. The next one I'm going to take, it's very easy. It says, would we be able to see the video clip of Simon conducting, please?
Have we got that?
The answer is yes. I have
Great.
figured it out. I am so sorry, Katie, it didn't work, but here it is. Dun, dun, dun. Hold on. Where is it? I swear I have it.
You don't need to show it.
No, I do. I really, really do. Okay. So everybody's going to see my messy screen for a minute, but we'll make it happen. Okay.
So a few elements of context here. The sound that you're hearing is a MIDI mock-up of the piece. So it's not real voices, it's computer-generated voices. And second thing, I had to conduct in advance with the sound so that people would register my movements and sing in time with the click track. If I conducted with the click track, people would be singing late all the time. So those are the two things that were tricky making this click track, and a horrible experience to make them too. But I share this with my colleagues. Making an online recording at home by yourself is not a great experience.
Okay, Kathleen, why don't we take another 2 questions? We're going on into the night here.
Okay.
Can you select another 2 for us?
Yes. Okay. This first one has a little popularity. So I will say, how do you anticipate managing the safety of singers as you return to live? Is singing with masks an option in performance? Are singers ready to return?
Who wants to take that one?
Katie, I guess as a singer, you could answer the last portion of that, which is, are singers ready to return?
Well, I mean, I think the vaccination question enters into this, certainly from my perspective. You know, if we can all get vaccinated, then like absolutely, the sooner the better. Oh my gosh, get me into a rehearsal hall, please, and thank you.
Great. Who would like to talk about singing with masks, an option in performance?
Maybe Katie, you could start that one, and we could hand off to Simon.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that TMC did this year early in the season was provide us all with these singers masks, which are a particular form of mask that contains some boning in it so that it actually holds the fabric out from your face. So it is sealed all around the nose and under the chin, but you're able to have some really nice freedom of movement in terms of your mouth and your lips and everything. So yeah, I mean, they've now become a pretty normal part of singing life, seemingly at this point. So, you know, singing in one of those masks certainly does feel different than singing without, but it's not terrible. It's certainly, I think, a great step on the way to getting back to singing unmasked with a huge group of people, you know.
Simo, how does it affect you in balancing the sound and you know, creating a choral sound and so on with masks on?
Well, I just want to start by saying that the TMC, the way we're going to present concerts will depend on the level of comfort of our singers, of the professional corps, and of our audience. So the decision will go hand in hand with the regulation in place in the province and in the city. And as for my my role, conducting with a mask is horrible. And I realized this year how much the eyes by themselves are not enough, that what you're doing with the mouth complements what you're doing with the eyes and with the hands. And it's very difficult to conduct with a mask. And to have singers sing in masks, it doesn't really complicate the balance if everyone is wearing a mask, because the sound somehow travels upwards. You lose some of the harmonics. It's not the same quality, but in terms of balance, it doesn't change much. But I recently watched Handmaid's Tale, and it's very reminiscent of that. So I cannot wait for the moment where people will be without masks.
Yeah. Okay. Kathleen, have we got one more?
We've got several more, but I'm
Yeah,
going
I
to
know.
try to pick one that's more in line with our topic this evening. Let's go with this question. I'm very impressed with the initiatives on diversity. Do you have any advice for small budget community music organizations?
Who wants to take that one?
I would say start talking to the people you want to collaborate with. It's not more costly to get someone on board who can help you and guide you through it. You cannot do that. You cannot add diversity as a single person endeavor. It's a dialogue. It's collaboration. So I think starting with finding someone to collaborate with that you're excited to collaborate with is a great first step, regardless of the size of and budget size of the organization.
Good. Okay. Well, maybe we should wrap up here. We've gone over our allotted time, and I see that the numbers are dropping in participants, so maybe that's a good sign. So my thanks to all our panelists tonight: Anne Longmore, Simo Rizar, Katie Clark, and Dave King. Also want to thank Kathleen Stevenson, the TMC Manager of Artistic Operations, who, as you saw and heard, was really the person behind the screen for tonight. And also want to thank Anna Koitar, the Executive Director of the Mendelssohn Choir, Amy Saffer, the General Manager, and Laura Wood, the TMC Alumni Program Manager. On behalf of everyone, thank you for attending tonight's TMC presentation. The 2021-22 TMC season will be one of the most exciting in the choir's history, and it'll be the 128th season. As you probably know, a new artistic director has recently been appointed, Jean-Sébastien Vallée. Jean-Sébastien and the TMC staff are working hard right now, developing a fantastic first season together. So please stay tuned and informed on what the choir has in store for us. The website is www.tmchoir.org. That's tmchoir.org. In the meantime, have a safe and healthy summer, and we all look forward to welcoming you virtually or in person or both for the 2021-22 TMC season. I'm Rick Phillips. Good night.